What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Unveil Podcast. We're here with a very special guest. Mark Carlberg is joining us all the way from Tennessee, and I'm super excited to have him on. As everybody here knows, if you watch, my Instagram, I just posted a video. I am not an audio guy by any means, and I seem to have a lot of friends in the creative industry who do a lot of things that I don't know anything about, but I'm very interested in all of it. And if you're anything like me, this world is fascinating and it's so deep, and you just kind of want to eat it all up, learn all about it. And Mark is one of those guys where I can talk to him about anything creatively in this town tech industry, and this dude is a genius. He's like an audio wizard, and I know a lot of it has to do with him putting himself underneath people who are audio wizards. And so this is the guy to talk to, and we're going to learn a little bit about what he does, his career, kind of his job over at Maryville, and maybe just talk a little bit about random stuff too. He mentioned that he's going to send me some barbecue one day, so maybe that's a thing we can we can chat about. But anyways, Mark, thank you so much for hopping on here. Why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're from and what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the introduction, and I just want to say thank you for having me. Consider it, a great honor when people want to ask me questions and think that I have something to say. I don't feel like I necessarily always have something valuable to say. Sometimes I just go on rants, and then share my opinion, and then my opinion's wrong.
Dude, that's what we all do, man. My wife gets so frustrated at me. I talk about what I'm passionate about, and I just go on and on. She's like, Martin, it sounds like you're yelling at me. Am I in trouble? I'm like, no, I'm just passionate about this
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, you're just yelling about it. But that's who I am as a person. Is that, I just yell at people. No, I'm just kidding. No, my name is Mark, as Martin said, and I'm an audio engineer. I'm a freelance audio engineer based out of Maryville, Tennessee. So what does that mean? Basically means that I work for anybody and everybody that I want to. It's a lot of fun. Everyone's technically freelance in this creative bubble, so everyone's working for friends and friends of friends and that kind of thing. But I've been doing this professionally probably for 7 or 8 years. I've been full-time freelance for 3 years now, I think. 2.5, 3 years. I graduated IBC in 2021, and from there I actually got hired at FAC Maryville full-time as the audio director, and then I ended up making a transition a couple of years back to full-time freelance, and I actually volunteer at the church. And so it's been a different change of pace for me and the church and stuff like that. We're still trying to figure out things and trying to I don't know, get things dialed in. So it's been a tough one on both of our sides, because doing freelance, I'm out of town a lot. And the church needs me, a lot, and so it's trying to figure out that.
I think that's interesting. Freelance audio. Okay, so coming from the camera field, where everything I do is video or photo based, or even just marketing based. It is interesting because I see these guys every event that I go to. They're behind the board, they're running audio, but it's also a foreign world to me, and I don't understand really the concept of being a freelance audio engineer. So what does that look like on a day-to-day for you? I mean, I saw your calendar when we were trying to schedule this, and you're traveling all the time, and so there's clearly a market for a freelance audio engineer. But what does that even mean?
Yeah, I'll first say that I'm very blessed, and I thank God every day for what I'm able to do and what I get to do, because this is something I'm passionate about. Not very many people get to do what they are passionate about for a living, and so I'm very thankful, very blessed, and just trying to stay in that thankfulness era. So what that looks like for me, that's kind of a big overview, I guess. People hire me for various things. Obviously mixing is of that general thing, but it's not necessarily just that. A lot of what I do is consultations and consulting with churches, whether it's new buildings that are going up and they don't really know who to work with. They don't know who's going to be the best partner as far as getting the integration done with their AVL. And so with my experience, I'm able to kind of help them, push them in the right directions, give them things to think about before they start, actually building the building. And then with existing buildings, which is more common, obviously, is figuring out how can we improve our audio in whatever ways, whether it's broadcasts or it's front of house or it's monitors. I kind of help with all the areas. That's been the thing for every church. Every church has got monitors. They got front of house for the audience, what the audience hears, and every church has got a broadcast now, especially with COVID. So
yeah, it's become the standard now.
Yeah, there's no church that doesn't have a broadcast at this point. So I kind of do a lot of that. I do system designs for live events or installations. So mapping out in 3D software where the speakers are supposed to go, figuring line of sight, making sure that it works with the LED walls and stuff like that. And the approach and the idea with like system design, this is a whole nother tangent, but like you're trying to make sure that the experience is the same for every single person in the building. So there's actually a lot that goes into it. And it's one of the things that people get paid a lot of money to do this system design thing. And so that's been a little bit of a focus area the last 2 years for me, is doing that as much as I can. And then anything between system tuning, which is like taking into account what the room is doing to your PA and making sure it sounds as good as possible for the room, along with a bunch of other detailed things.
Do you mess with any of that, like putting up, panels and stuff on walls, or is it strictly just the technical system?
So I'm not an acoustical engineer. It's a whole different field. I do know about it, and I know some basic theory, I guess, if you could say that.
Sure.
And so I'm definitely in a position where I can suggest it, and be like, hey, this is the problem. I know if it's the problem, I should say it that way.
So you're really probably in a lot of venues, you're working around existing issues and just needing to troubleshoot the issues.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like, people will bring me in, right? Pastors will bring me in or whoever, and they'll be like, well, we want to get this new console, or we want to do this, and we're trying to fix this. We're having issues with this, and it's like, reality is like the problem is, funny enough, it's acoustic treatment, and like
you're in a warehouse.
You're in a metal box. What do you expect? Yeah.
That's so funny too, because it's like even here, like we talk like, oh, we need a new system, and it is funny because just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars doesn't automatically improve your audio quality if the room isn't treated.
Yeah, and the thing is like, a lot of people are like, okay, I know if I get a new console, it's gonna fix all these problems. Like that's what their mindset is.
Sure.
And really, it's like, no, you have like 20 issues compiled up that make this issue, and the biggest one of them is like acoustic treatment, and then the person like, or the design of the PA, and then and then the person running sound, so it's like, so you have like these three big issues, and then you have all these other smaller issues, and so it's like it builds up. And what's funny is like my church, FAC Maryville, it's like we have a lot of resources, and we have a lot of people in our circles that help us out and stuff like that. Of course, I've been here too, but when you're working against like issues, and like the issue when I first came in, for example, was our PA deployment was not set up correctly. And I'm not gonna go super technical with this, but like, we didn't have any stereo coverage in our room. The PA was like really close together. Like the backs of the PA were like almost like 15 feet apart, 20 feet apart.
Okay.
It was creating weird things. Anyways, it was just the coverage was not good and was not even, and the experience in the room was not the same from front to back and left to right. And think about it from like a ministry perspective. Like, we're trying to engage people. We're trying to make sure people have a great experience so that it's like uninterrupted and that Jesus can connect with them. If we're giving like a different experience to every single person, we have no idea how to account for it or how to make sure this atmosphere that we're creating is like the target for them to, that would conduce to an environment. Right. So like, for example, like this is a really easy example. Like, you're in the front of the room and it's really hot and it's blaring. And it's like, nobody wants to sit up there now. They want to sit in the back. But now intelligibility is an issue because the speakers don't hit the far back, right? So now they can't hear every single word, and now they're like missing stuff when the audience is clapping. Like, that's the prime example I run into a lot. And then they lose out on some of the stuff that your pastor is saying, or maybe the worship leader is saying. And not to go into too much, but like, that's why I stress so much to our sound team and to other churches, is that it's so important that every single person hears every single solo and every single word that someone's saying over from the stage, because you have no idea what that couple words might mean to somebody sitting in the audience. That could be the difference between them being saved and them walking out. And so I think it's one of those things we have to kind of take some responsibility for, and kind of going back to our conversation, it's this is like all the initial stuff that we need to get right to make sure that we're able to reach people.
It's funny because I feel like a lot of our like similarities in industry really do come down to the detail stuff. Like there's your big picture, big swaths of like equipment. You have, very expensive equipment. You have a ton of little things that go into it. But then the small detail, which is what you just said, I feel like there is a purpose for what we're trying to do. It's not just so everybody has a great time. It's so that if there is one specific person sitting in the back, that I know that person can receive the same exact experience that the people in the front are receiving. And I know similarly for us, we're like, that one reel that I post, it's got to reach that one person, and it has to be worded this way, or it has to be edited this way, whatever. But there's small little details that people just don't really think about when it comes to this stuff, because they only think about the big picture, which is I need to spend, X amount of money to have the best camera or the best, sound equipment. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's so easy to be like
over spiritualize it, but it's a real thing.
Well, I think and it's like, you kind of said, it's like, it's not about the gear, it's like, it's about the mission. And obviously gear helps us accomplish the mission, but just because I think that Sony A7 IV is the best camera and I have to use it for my podcast and I have to use it for my live stream now and like everything, that doesn't necessarily mean that's like, you have to have that. Like the most expensive camera ever, which I don't think it's the most. I don't know what the most expensive camera is.
He doesn't know anything about cameras, guys, because he also said the Sony A7 IV was the best. So
yeah, I don't even know. I just know that that's kidding. What Asa told me. That's what this camera was.
It is, and a lot of people will probably say it is the best.
Really? Okay, cool.
Not me. I'm not one of those, but
I'm a red guy. I only do reds.
Oh my! It's like not even the same. It's not even the same. Not even the same bracket.
Yeah, sorry.
I have no comparison to your world.
I'm
so
a little
I wouldn't even know.
So like we use a lot of L acoustics and D&B PA systems. Those are like speaker manufacturers. I would say like the Red camera is like kind of like using L acoustics or a D&B speaker system.
Okay,
that makes sense. It's like it's boutique essentially.
That's the elitist
sound systems. Yeah, but we use them because it helps us get that same kind of.
Sure, it's a curated sound. Yeah, I get it.
It gets us the best overall consistency. So,
Yeah, my level of audio knowledge is hertz, highs and lows, and mids.
Yeah, all you need to know is really like lows, mids, and highs when it comes to your car stereo, and then you're fine.
Yeah, you treble. I know treble and bass.
You do smiley face EQ.
That's right. That's right.
Take out all those mids. I want more
That's
bass and
so
more
funny.
highs.
That's how I edit my sound. That's what I do.
Exactly.
It was funny you commented on our videos, like finally something about audio or something like that. I was like, that's funny. Yeah, we don't give enough love. We don't give enough love to the audio guys.
What's funny is that you guys do audio all the time.
All the time.
In a weird way. You guys do audio all the time. You probably do audio more than I do.
Yeah. It's consistently on my workflow. Make sure the audio sounds good. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, it's funny because even like Chase Condon, like, even when I first met him, I was like, okay, this guy, he's a video guy or whatever and stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's like, he's got more plugins than I do. when I came here, I was like, okay. He doesn't know how to use half of them. He just knows like what sounds good. He's like pushing buttons and turning dials.
That's where the difference is.
He's got an ear, so it works out, you know.
So I remember my first time meeting you was 2019. I think it was 2019, and we met. You were at IBC, right?
When did we meet?
Oh, dude, so funny. I was on United tour.
Okay, I was just gonna say. I think I was thinking about that. I was thinking the only time the first time I think I remember meeting you was at my church. Funny enough.
Yep.
Because you were on United tour.
So at Urshan, we do tour very differently from how IBC does their praise tour. And I was drumming, and I was introduced to, which also, by the way, I'm a drummer, but I am no drummer. Like I play drums. Yeah, dude, I played drums because I enjoyed it. And, you know, if somebody asked me, you know, hey, man, what mics do you like to mic up your drum set with? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. Whichever ones sound good. Like, I don't know anything about the technical side of anything, but I could hop on and I could play. So, Mark comes in, and he's at his church, and we roll up. And the sound was decent, but dude, Mark decides that he's gonna go with us to the next church that we go to, and he's gonna help us. He's gonna help us with our sound because we didn't have a dedicated sound guy for a tour, and I guess IBC brings a dedicated sound person. And Mark looks at me as the drummer, and he goes, "Hey man, so because the acoustics were not great at the church we were at, it's like, hey man, so." How comfortable do you feel setting up your drum set in the bathroom, and we'll just mic you up and we'll just run the sound out to the sanctuary? I was like, what? Is this what you do?
So, yeah, and maybe I'll send you a photo. Maybe you can pop that in this. I don't know if you can. But on IBC Praise Tours, sound quality is like, that's the important thing for us. We're not bringing video guys with us. We do bring like videographers and stuff now, as of a couple of years ago, and we bring lyric tech. We haven't brought any lighting guys with us before, so we typically just try to contact the church and have them supplement like the positions we don't bring with us, right? So audio quality is definitely the highest importance for us on IBC tours, or at least was. I don't know now. It is. I'm just kidding.
Don't throw them under the bus.
I'm just kidding. They still travel. They travel with one or two guys every tour now. So the thing for us though was like if we were in a situation where the church didn't have a drum enclosure, because we're typically bringing like a choir or a chorale, basically, we didn't want to have to deal with like. The songs that we're playing are like CCM or CCM hybrid gospel type stuff. So you have to hit those drums harder to get the sound that we're looking for. Well, that's like more important than having to play like super light on a kit, right? So there's been like, I don't know, I've done it like at least 10 times, if not like more, where we'll set up into a different room and it's like 100 feet away. We'll set up 100 feet away. They'll have a personal mixer and everything like that. They just can't see anything, but the drummer is like hearing talkbacks and everything like that. And they're just playing in a different room because it's like audio quality is more important.
An unbelievable realization for me. I was like, they do this.
We had this one time where actually I'll give you two things. There was one time where we set up in a back room of a storefront church, super small. Like we couldn't even fit all the instruments on stage. Like it was like the vocals had to stagger around the instruments basically to make this work, because it was like,
oh yeah,
50 people tops could fit in this place.
Yeah.
Well, the drums were definitely in the back for this one, and it started getting dark, and there was no lights in the back room.
Oh.
So like, by the time service got done, we could like walk in there into the back, and like all we could see is like these little flickering lights from his P16, like that little personal mixer thing. Like he had his phone light on. We couldn't see anything.
Pitch black trying to play.
Yeah, it was legit one of the
war
funniest
stories.
one of the funniest things. And probably the most funny thing is when we went to Florida, Abigail Hayworth's, or it's Abigail Ballesteros' church now.
Get it right.
Yeah. And in Ocala, Florida. And they did not have any drum enclosure, no acoustic treatment. So it was like, we have room to do the drums, but we can't do it in this room. So we're like, the only room that's not 200 feet away is the bathroom. And the bathroom, like, we're going to show you this photo. The bathroom is like 4 feet by like 4 feet by 3 feet, with the sink and the toilet in there. So we actually set up, and we were on corral tour, so we have 2 drummers that had to swap out. So one of the drummers like on the toilet sitting while the other drummer was on a seat. And then we went to like a 2-piece kit, like just a tom 1 and 3, like a high tom and 4 tom. And then they only did like 2 cymbals just to make it fit in this in this room.
That's a real CCM kit.
Yeah. And they're just chilling in this bathroom the whole time. It's like literally the funniest thing, bro.
Dude, so from your perspective, there's a lot of things that would have to like, you'd have to like kind of remix a little bit in order to make some stuff work. So there's some sacrifices that have to be made. Because I know as a drummer, I'm like, dude, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave the sanctuary. I don't want to leave like the moment, because like you feel like you're losing something a little bit from yourself. Like you feel like I'm losing out on the energy. So you're not a drummer, but walking through that, you are.
Yeah, I actually started on drums. So
my bad.
I haven't played in like, I don't know, since like a little bit after my IBC days. So
dude, could you still hop on, and you think you could do it still?
Dude, I'm rusty. But
that's how I feel.
I still love playing drums. Like if I ever get, like whenever I get on a kit and stuff, it's like, man, I need to get back on practicing and stuff like that. But that's why
like having that pre-knowledge, like being able to like tune your sound, or yeah,
absolutely. That's the only reason I think I'm as good as, not that I'm good, but like I think I'm only as good as I am because of my musical knowledge. So like my degree from IBC is a music degree, and I learned how to play acoustic guitar at my old church. I started with drums, and then I started like learning bass. That's the only reason I know those instruments and know like a little bit about piano. And that's the only reason that I feel like I'm able to have those conversations with people.
Yeah.
And understand where the music is going and stuff like that, so.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I feel like I was talking to Nate Rippey. It was either Nate or it was Braxton. I can't remember. But either way, we were just talking about how like having a background in music helps with what we do as well, like content creation, because a lot of what we do, cutting on beat, especially when you're cutting live stream, making sure you're cutting on beat, making sure that like you're aware of
that. That was a trigger, bro. That was a trigger, bro. You got me. I'll shout out to Ben Cashin, because
shout out
to Ben Cashin, because he knows music, and he knows audio, and he knows video, and so the best video directors are the best switchers, I should say, are the music, that like the ones that know music. Agree. Though they're former musicians, and I this is gonna. I'm so tired of seeing like all these shots, and then like, I'm not a video guy, but here's the thing: is like the worship leader is like singing something, and then they have like they're focusing on like a piano, but the piano's not actually playing like a riff or anything like that, and the worship leader's like saying something, and it's like, why am I looking at the piano when the worship leader is doing something like that? Or like the guitar solo is going and they're not on the guitar solo. but it's like it's more than that. It's like it's cutting on beat, and it's like knowing what's going to happen with the song in those moments. And it's like, oh, when that, like, they go to that breakdown, or they go down to that soft bridge moment, and it's like, the audience, like, we know the audience is like gonna start like going ham, right?
Yeah.
So then I would probably want to like go cut. I don't know anything about video, but I know.
No, but you're right.
But
You're right.
but I want to cut back to the
match
audience.
the energy of what's going on. It's a give and take.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, like, how can I connect my. Why am I a video guy now? How do I connect my audience? How do I connect my audience to what's happening in the room?
Yeah.
And as a musician, we kind of understand the song dynamics. We already know what's going on. We know the music, and so, like, I know what to expect. I know, like, what elements are happening at each time.
Yep.
So it's like, that's why I'm actually, like, I even tell, like, friends of mine, it's like, I believe that church cam operators, like, should be super involved with our rehearsals. They should learn the song. So our producers, like, we have a producer at my church, for, we have service producers or whatever, and they're calling out, oh, it's guitar solo, it's piano riff, things like that. But it's on a very, like, and I'm not trying to add anybody, like, this is where we're at. This is real world. Like, the producer's not musician. They're a very organized person, which is what we need in that position. But they don't necessarily, like, hear everything in the music, and so they miss things, and that's okay. We're in everybody's growing, but and I think we have one of the best producers out there, or multiple producers, I should say. I think we do a really good job with it. But I think there's room for improvement when it comes to that, because they don't necessarily know everything. And then the camera operators get up for service, and they're just waiting on cues from the producer, where in reality, it's like, I would rather have the cam operators be a part of the rehearsal, and, like, no, I need to be on the piano for the verse, and then I need to, like, for that piano riff on the verse, and then I need to go to that duet. I know that I need 2 cameras on the duet. Like, you're trying to engage, everybody, and let them know what's happening. And if I'm missing that, it's like, I don't know.
And I feel like sometimes it feels like it might be overkill, but when you think about what the mission is behind what we're doing, and also that the Bible just calls us to do everything with excellence, like, don't do it half-heartedly, just do it to the best of your ability, is I feel like sometimes we miss out on that because we don't want to be overkill, or we don't want to do the most or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, this is also where you've been positioned, and this is also, the job that God has for you here in this moment. So do it with excellence. And, I can't stand whenever I feel like things are just half-hearted, or when they're not like, this could be better, guys. Like, this could definitely be better. We're getting lazy.
I'll say 2 things about that.
Dude, say more, man, if you want to.
The first thing is in Exodus, when they were building the tabernacle, who did God call for the people to build the tabernacle? It was the skilled laborers. Like, it wasn't like Annie and Johnny over there that were, like, available. It was like, no, we're gonna look for the people that know what they're doing, that are good at it, and like, we want those people. And so I think about that, and it's like, who are you gonna have pour concrete for your church? Are you gonna have, like, the the volunteer that's open and available, or are you gonna have the professional that knows how to do it right? And I think it's one of those things, like, let's get into the mindset of doing everything with excellence, because there's multiple scriptures that God calls us to do everything wholeheartedly as unto the Lord, right? And is that Colossians 3:23?
Dude, you're asking me right now on the spot like that?
I'm not a pastor or anything, but
oh, seriously?
But so I think there's already too many scriptures that tell us to do everything with excellence. And here's the thing: is if we want to minister to people, we should be wanting to do everything possible to reach people. And I think of this in, like, multiple ways. First, like, in worship and stuff like that, when I'm mixing, like, I'm using that gift and I'm giving it back to God. Like, I'm worshiping God with my gift. So can I expect God to accept my worship if I'm not giving him everything? Think of it as a musician or even a vocalist sometimes. But same as a camera operator or anybody else that's serving. If I don't even practice for more than 5 minutes, can I tell God that's my best? And the question is, if it's in our power to do better, is God going to accept that? That's my question.
Sure.
When running through a service and stuff like that. So I say that because we know biblically God does not accept all worship. We go to the story of Abraham and Isaac, for example. It's like very clear. Like if we don't give him our best, we just can't expect God to accept it. And so, that's one of my prayers every service that I serve is, God, I ask that you would accept my worship. And I believe that I did everything I could to prepare for this. Please give me an anointing, and so I think that's my heart towards it. And so, and obviously I'm passionate about it, but I think it's because I've, I think about those scriptures that calls us to that. I forgot exactly what I was going to say something else. Dear God, I can't even think anymore.
Dear Lord, give it to him.
Give it to me.
Well, if you do remember, the scripture was in Colossians. The scripture was in Colossians. Yes, yeah. What translation do you want me to read it in?
Is there that street version?
The street. Dude, I don't have the street version available, man.
No, KJV is fine, bro. KJV.
And whatsoever you do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men. And so, also New Living says, do it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. So I think that that's important as well because, man, like so often we do it not for the glory of God, but for the glory of ourselves or even for the accolades of those around us. And if we're doing it for God, then it doesn't matter what the people around us even think. And I think having that missional clause to it where we're saying, I want the one person that's sitting in the back, in your case, to be able to hear and experience the same exact thing that the people up front are hearing and experiencing. And then also in a broader picture, I want everybody to have a beautiful experience in service and not be distracted by muddy audio, not be distracted by, speakers whining and pitching. I want to be able to, I want everything to sound really good. And then I'm thinking about myself. I don't want to be a distraction to anybody around me. I also want, whenever I produce something, for it to bless those that are watching it. And if I'm doing it with that mission, then I am doing it with excellence. And I do want to go the extra mile. But it's the second you start doing it for man, second you start doing it for man that things start to kind of fall apart.
That's literally, you hit it right on the ball, man. That's like, you're doing it for God, and once we become clear on that goal, I think sometimes we have a mindset shift. I remember what I was going to say. This hits home for me. I do a lot of clinics when I go out to churches and stuff, and this is actually something I hit up on a lot. When we get into situations where one of our volunteers is not passionate about that ministry that they're in, or not doing it with the utmost excellence, I always go back to the story I heard from one of the production managers at Hillsong, and they had a situation where they had a female vocalist that was just not good, and man, it is what it is, and she just wasn't good, right? Well, they were like, okay, we're gonna need to have a conversation with her. This doesn't just seem to be a good fit for her. Whether and the backstory of that is like we don't I guess not backstory, but like we don't know like if she wasn't practicing or if she was practicing and she just really couldn't get it, or she didn't have the right people involved with helping her. Well, what they ended up doing is having a conversation with her, sitting her down and and saying like, hey, we don't really think this is the best ministry for you to serve in. We just don't seem like you don't seem to have the gifts to do this. We do, however, think you have possibly some gifts in another area, and that's sound. So, and obviously, like at first she's like opposed to it. She's like that's first of all, that's a big hit. It's a tough conversation to have if you don't have that culture set up already. It's a really hard conversation to have. I do think we should have a culture where we can have honest conversations with, and obviously that person's going to be hurt right away when they hear that. But once we start offering a solution, a path towards like getting involved in a different area, or maybe it's like a path to being back on that vocal team. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's a standard that they have set. They set the standard.
I agree with you. I think that we should have that.
So then
I think it's hard to develop that as well.
Yeah. And I think it's more like, all right, hey, this person's not doing well. Instead of just like not scheduling them or not saying anything, it's like, hey, I want to help
them.
Yeah. I want to help you. Like, do what you love to do. So, I'd like to talk about a couple different opportunities and what that would look like. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we could get you with one of our vocal coaches, and we'd love to set you up on a weekly one-on-one for a half an hour or whatever like that, free of charge. We want to help you. And then you're going to help the church, by blessing us, and, by blessing us with your vocal tech, your
right,
vocal.
right.
So it could look multiple ways, but in this situation, she accepted it for what it was, and she started working with the sound team. And like, timeline, I'm thinking it's like 7 more years ago, but like she was a monitor engineer for the Hillsong Creative Conference. She's one of the better like sound or monitor engineers out there. So like,
so that it paid off.
It paid off. And so like, all to say is, I think, knowing like where your people at and knowing how to use your volunteers and knowing what they're going to be passionate at, like giving them opportunities, giving them exposure, because she became passionate about it. So I think it's one of those things. She just didn't have those gifts. God hasn't given the same gifts to every single person. And so it's like, as much as I would love to sing, like I wholeheartedly would love to like be a worship leader and stuff like that. I just haven't been necessarily blessed with those talents, and I haven't necessarily practiced those.
Come on, Mark.
As much as I would love to. So I think it's just like realizing that and using our talents to the best that we can. We go to the story of the parable of the 10 talents. It's like, what are you going to do with your talents? Are you going to bury them?
Yeah.
So I think like how they redirected that person and they became passionate is, I think, a learning lesson for us, because a lot of times we just keep people in these positions as a volunteer, and it's like they have they're not passionate about what they're doing. They're just doing it because they're willing, and that's a great, like, man, we have so many people in my church that are just so willing to volunteer. They're literally the best. They have the best heart and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily have the skills to be in every single position. And so I think the best thing you can do with those people, especially with the people that are like, I'll be involved wherever you want me, and they're helping out in like 100 different ministries.
Yeah.
It's figuring out how they can best serve the church with their skill set. I run into a lot of situations with sound where people are tech-minded in the sound, and it's like, that's like the worst. That's the worst person to put in a mixed position, right? So, yeah, this is actually opening up a whole nother envelope.
Let's do it,
bro. That's the worst person to put into the mixed position, because that mixed position is like an artistic creative role, not a technical thing. Like, now I was like a technical person as a kid, but then I became like a musician and like creative.
See, I was going to ask you where you feel like that line is drawn for you between creative and technical. Because I know myself, I'm not a technical person, but there are things that I can get very technical about. Like I can be very, very hyper focused on small detail stuff that it's really, at the end of the day, it's like, all right, Martin, relax. But overall, I'm not a technical guy. Like I can't even stand talking gear with like other camera guys, because I'm just like, dude, like I don't care.
Yeah. So I'm like in a very like, I'm definitely like a hybrid version of that, which is, I think, gives me like a little bit of a edge on some people, like versus being super techie but not creative, or versus being really like a musician, really creative but not technical. I think I balance both of those out. but I would say like even like lately, it's like I don't understand every single console. I don't understand like
Yeah.
every single piece of gear. I've had to learn the gear to be able to do what I'm looking for it to do, basically, and that's kind of that's the ideal thing is you get a person that's very creative, that knows music, that can learn because the thing is like it's really hard to teach an ear to hear, right? Like
Sure.
it takes a long time for that to develop, where it's really easy to show someone how to operate a console and learn the technical stuff. You can watch some videos on that, but you can't,
It's the same thing with video. You can't teach somebody how to have an eye.
Yeah, exactly. So the worst thing you could do is put someone that's an IT management person or expert or whatever you call them into that position. And honestly, 9 times out of 10 when I go to churches, it's literally the IT guy that's like mixing.
So funny.
And it's like, what do you expect? It's like the guy knows everything about the console. Like, I walk into these churches, these guys know more about the console than I do.
Yeah.
But they have no idea.
Some guys at my church like that. Yeah.
And so it's like, so obviously that's gonna be an issue. I would rather end up putting a musician in that position and having the IT guy help him figure out how to work the console.
So talk me through that. What makes the mix more creative than technical? So
the thing, the basis of what you're doing is you're summing all of these audio signals together through this interface, through this technology, and you're creating one single feed for everybody to listen to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this thing that you're mixing is typically music for a majority of your service and stuff. So it's dynamic. There's ups and downs. Every instrument is changing like their patches and their sound and stuff like that. The drummer's playing differently throughout the song. So there's all these minute changes. The vocalists are changing their timbre. They're changing how they sing for different parts. So there's like this. There's like hundreds of thousands of things happening in a worship service ultimately, and we're trying to create something that's musical, that's nice to hear, and that's going to reinforce what the stage team is doing. So you're trying to interpret that and deliver that to the audience. And so
do you find at most churches when you say that, what you just said, do you find most audio guys are like rolling their eyes like, dude, like is it really that serious? Now I'm not challenging it because I agree with you, but I do feel like when I ask this or when I hear someone ask this, it's like, hey man, like we just got the sound sounding good and that's all that matters.
I mean, most people realize when I have that conversation, they understand where they're at if they're that person, right?
Sure.
They understand that, but they don't know necessarily the next step for them, or they don't necessarily want to take the next step.
That's a lot of work.
They're comfortable with where they're at. A lot. That's what I deal with a lot, is that people are comfortable with where they're at with their knowledge, and they just want to chill. So I've had so many different interactions, and then of course, like you deal with like soundman syndrome kind of guys. That's like the very territorial. We call them soundman syndrome. It's like that territorial like attitude.
It's a stereotype, and it's true. It's true.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Bite my head off, man. I'm just asking for a line out so I can have a recording from the board. It's all I need.
He's talking about me. No, where that attitude comes from, like, from in my experience, is it comes from the same person running sound every single service for 30 years. Not necessarily 30 years, but that's where it comes from.
But you're talking to somebody.
That's where it comes from. And what happens over that course of time, because they just did 3 services a week for that amount of time, and they're typically very faithful people in a lot of those cases, is that they become the only person that's doing that. They're not building up their team. The pastor's not trying to encourage people to be a part of that team. And so they create ownership of that position. They create ownership. Sometimes a lot of those guys will like purchase gear personally because they're trying to make it better or whatever. And they have great hearts behind what they're doing. But what happens is that in the sound world, and even with other positions, you have to give 100% of the time. A lot of times I'm not really getting involved in the actual service, because I'm paying so much attention to what's happening in the moment. And so it's basically becomes a job for them. And because of the time that they spent and invest into it, the money that they invest into it, like, this is their baby now. And because you didn't get people to be a part of it, and you didn't create a rotation, you didn't create proper department heads and structure and systems, now it's like, I guess it's his department, even though, like, we haven't really specified that. So, that's where it comes from. And I'm posting like a thing on like today, I think, about some of the best practices for creating a healthy like volunteer team. But the biggest thing is having proper structure, systems, documents, and stuff in place to create that culture that you're wanting to see. And I honestly recommend, if you're not big enough to have a like tech director, that the worship director or your worship pastor would be over the sound team and over that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they're a part of the band. So that sound person.
That's a hot take.
Yeah,
it is. I've never heard that before.
The sound person is a part of the band. It's like the ninth member of the band, so to speak. And I suggest, like, and this is how we treat it at IBC, is if the band is doing something, that sound person's going with them. They're in those rehearsals, they're learning the songs just the same way. And first of all, it creates camaraderie. They feel like they're a part of the team.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they need to know what's happening, so I think it's really critical. But I think if we started treating like they're part of the worship team, like your sound man syndrome kind of goes away with that a little bit, and a couple other things. And there's multiple things to it. It's not just one issue or anything like that. So, but I think that's a thing.
Well, so it's the same. I mean, so I think of the sound man syndrome. I also think about the stereotype that we get as creatives. It's the same stereotype that sound men get. And even the media guys that are in the back, running Pro Presenter, is these guys are the ones that are not paying attention in service. These guys are the ones that are, most likely talking with their friends, most likely on their phones, most likely
watching the football game.
Sitting in the back with a T-shirt on, and it's like they just don't care. And so, like this, I have never ever seen you or Vito or Ben be disconnected from service at And of course, every time I see you guys, you're doing a major event. And so if you were to disconnect, you most likely are going to miss a very important thing. And you don't want to be that guy. But in a situation,
if you miss something, you get fired, is the kind of reality.
Yeah. But at a church where you're day in, day out doing the same exact thing, it can become monotonous.
For sure.
Yeah. Like, how do we spice this thing up? How do we make this thing different?
So let me interject and say that one of the things I'm like putting on Instagram today, I think, is like, you need to create rotation, because like we care about the people that are serving in those background roles. We care about their spiritual lives more than we care about filling a position.
Yeah, amen.
So if we don't create rotation, like I have a rule with my team at FAC that they have to have one service off a week. So here's the reality. Is like my church, we have 3 services a week, but we also have 4 other campuses right now. And some of those guys will go out to other campuses during the week. So you're talking about them serving they could serve like 5 times a week potentially.
Yeah.
It'd be really easy. We have Spanish service here now too. So technically on campus we have 4 services and then 2 student services in a week. So I mean we're going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are all over the place. That's crazy.
It's a different culture.
This is not standard. Element. This is not normal, guys. This is what they do. Okay.
This is what we do. Most churches don't do this. But like I had to get to a point where I was like, listen, we can't do this. Now, when I came in, we had 1 sound person at my church. So sound man syndrome central over here, kind of thing.
Sure.
What I did in the first year was I was like, I have to work every single service no matter what, and then this other sound guy's got to work every single service no matter what because of the needs of the church. And we built the team up to 10 people in the first year. Not everyone was at the place of being able to mix, but they were able to serve in those A2, and A2 stands for like audio 2 or an assistant.
Okay.
So in production terminology, like there's lighting A2, video A2. There's other things like that. So anything with a 2 is like an assistant. Sometimes there's A3s and stuff like that too. But we always have an A2 role. So we started creating rotation at that point. Once I got to 10 people, I was like, okay, we're at the perfect place. We can start having a rotation. Now people can have that one service off a week. That's when I implemented the rules at the year mark. But even for myself, I was working, I was doing 7 services a week personally. I was mixing 7 services. So It was like, okay, now I'm at a place where I need to have one service off, a week or a month to be able to make sure that I'm getting what I need out of the service, because you can't expect for them to be getting fed in that position. And so, but that's one of the things that helps, your department and their spiritual lives. And it's also like, as a department head, knowing where they're at personally and spiritually and helping them along in their path. And so, we implemented things like doing like a little devotional once a week, on Mondays and stuff, and just did a text thread. Nothing crazy. But
so
then
you would organize this, or maybe you wouldn't, but somebody would organize this for the tech team, just to make sure everybody was plugged in.
Yeah. So you're trying to keep them engaged with what's going on. You're trying to push them to be better at their roles. I'm also big into training, so I'm doing off-site trainings, so like, or out of service trainings. So they're coming midweek here for an hour or something like that, and I'm just working with them through a virtual sound check and trying to dial in some things and kind of go through maybe the last service or something like that. And so, so we're trying to do things outside of service times to get them to be better and get them to a point where they can mix, And so there's a shadow system that I do and all this. And I didn't mean to like jump ahead and get outside of that.
No, this is good.
But that there's multiple things as far as like making sure that people are spiritually getting what they need. Because when I'm doing an event, like you were saying, there's no option for me to not be 100% on that service. Like I just don't get work afterwards if I mess up.
Yeah.
Service, and we were kind of saying this earlier, is if I mess up, if I'm taking this seriously, and and I taught my team the same thing. I was like, if we're on our phones and we didn't realize, and they're speaking. Typically, this happens when you're speaking. Somebody's watching the football game, and they're just sitting back there, and then the speaker or the preacher or whatever comes out, and it's like, and then you weren't paying attention, and now they're in front of a speaker, and it's like feeding back, and it's like, or something stupid, or like they ask for someone to come up and get an additional mic, whatever have you, or the piano player's up there, up there, and it's muted, like stupid things like that, but
it happens all the time.
Yeah, and it's because you're not paying attention, ultimately, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And, I had to kind of drive my team towards this point, is staying 100% focused. But I did that with, like, letting them know we're going to create that rotation and stuff like that.
Sure.
So there was, like, a benefit, basically, for them to stay 100% in tune. And obviously, like, it was one of those things. It was like, there's teaching moments, too. It was like, hey, man, like, I noticed you were on your phone and we missed a cue or something like that. Like, can we, and honestly, this didn't actually happen a lot with me or with my team. What happened more of the time was like looking down at the console or looking down at one of our control screens and like adjusting something. And then because we were like looking at or trying to edit something, we were missing a cue because we weren't looking at the stage.
Yeah.
And so, and this is actually something I dealt with a lot of time, even when I was at IBC, I dealt with this. I was just always looking down, making sure my gain structure is good, and knowing what faders I'm pushing. We almost need to get to the point where we know where all the faders are, and we're able to maintain as much time on the stage with our own two eyes as possible. That's why we also created the A2 position, is that's our second set of eyes, to verify what's going on and stuff like that. And so they're able to call out, like our A2, for example, is at front of house next to our A1, and it's like they see the pastor step forward, for example. They're on comms. They're actually able to tell our audio engineer and everybody on comms, hey, pastor's stepping out, pastor's coming up. So he gets unmuted. Video knows he's coming up.
Do you wear comms?
Not when we're mixing. Nobody that's mixing is wearing comms. All our A2s are on comms.
Cool.
So for bigger events, we'll have A2s for monitors and for front of house. For normal services, just for front of house. Typically, monitors, you're able to multitask a little bit. In our bigger events, I actually have an A2 for most of my events at monitors. That is giving me cues. That's able to relay stuff for me if I'm not able to. If there's like back end communication that's not direct, I can talk to most people because I'll have a talkback microphone, so I can reach the stage, I can reach comms, but I might not be able to reach the front of house A2 necessarily, or one of the producers, right? So if there's like something I'm like, hey, check this, or figure this out, he's able to relay that for me.
Sure.
Or if they're saying something, I don't necessarily always hear like the producer or the comms. It depends on our setup, and so that A2 for me can tell me, hey, this is going on. So
that's who Gyro was at a general conference. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. One of my best friends, great guy. He's a great audio engineer. And what's cool is like you're getting someone that knows audio and that knows how to communicate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They know how to troubleshoot stuff. So like he's able to run out on stage and fix something as soon as it happens.
That's cool.
Thing. But like for my church, we put the people that are not necessarily at the mixing point. Like they're not ready to mix service for themselves. So we put them in those A2 roles to shadow the front of house or the monitor engineer, and that allows for this like training ground. So they're able to shadow, and then eventually we'll trade roles. So then I'll be the A2, right?
Oh,
so I'm not necessarily mixing. Like the last year that I was at FAC full time, I wasn't actually mixing every service. I only mixed like one service.
But you're supervising, and
I was just shadowing and helping them mix.
That's cool.
Because like I'm trying to work in my mind, I'm trying to work myself out of a position. Like I'm trying to work myself out of a job. Like that's how I come across. Yeah.
That's what you want to do.
And like whatever God has for me next, if that does actually happen, I'm going to be totally okay with it because I accomplish my goal. I'm trying to create disciples in what I'm doing. And I want other people, like if I die today, or if I have to leave because God calls me somewhere, like I don't want to be in a place where I just leave the church empty-handed. Like I want to make sure that there's literally no hiccups. Like they could operate without me. And honestly, I can honestly say this. I feel like my church has done a fabulous job over this last year and a half or whatever that I've been full-time. They have gone uninterrupted. Like they haven't had like any major issues. Like the team has been amazing. And so kind of shout out to my FAC audio team. They have done a tremendous job. And of course when I come home I'm volunteering and I'm here and stuff, but like that fulfills what my mission I feel like God gave me is. That's like gives me everything that I need to see.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, oh, they don't even need me. I can sit in a service and I can worship God and I can be getting fed from the pastor. So it's like that's exactly what I wanted to see.
I think that's really admirable because the goal for everybody's job in church is to eventually work themselves out of a job. Like there should be no kings on hills, like ever. And I think that ownership of your ministry is so important, but ownership of your ministry includes training up a generation underneath you. And I think that's the part that lacks a lot of times in church culture is this is my ministry. This is what I do. And then you're 80 years old and it's like, okay, well, we haven't updated anything. Nothing sounds better than it used to 20 years ago. And it's because you haven't trained up this younger generation. And I feel like there's a fear of letting go, because once you feel like you've let go, then you feel like you're not important anymore.
And that's the fear, right? That's the fear. That's the fear, is that like you want to be relevant and you want to be a part and stuff like that. The heart behind it is technically like right, like as far as they want to be involved,
want to be used,
But ultimately, they created this like fear of like losing out their ministry and stuff like that, and that's kind of the issue. So
then you got young people sitting around in church, bumps on logs because nobody's taking a chance on them and training them in these avenues. Like I'm seeing young kids at our church right now that I'm like working with. We finally, I moved back here and my goal was to have a creative team. And so, we finally got a good group of people. But it was funny because like all these kids that I had no idea that this was their interest, all of a sudden out of the woodwork are like crushing it. And I'm like, oh, dude, thank God, man. Because I'm recognizing I don't want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, and I think understanding like seasons of life, right? So we understand that as a younger person, you're going to be more passionate about things. You're going to have more time to give into those things. That's why it's so important that when you're younger, especially if you're a musician, right? Like think about it from this perspective. You're a musician. It's really important that you do as much as you can when you're younger, because as soon as you go to college, as soon as you get married, like you now have responsibilities. As soon as you become 18, now you're paying for your own bills and so forth. So it's like you have a lot less time to be able to practice. But if you get to a point where you don't have to practice as much because you're so good, you know what I'm saying? Like I have some friends that are super talented, and like when they were younger, they had to practice for hours. Like if I had to like learn a song on drums right now, for example, it's going to take me, it's a new song I've never heard or whatever. It's going to take me 3 hours to like dissect the song. Try to get feel back, try to remember everything like that. Like honestly, I'm being kind of transparent about that. Like I'm not that good and I'm rusty, and that's just where I'm at. But if you get someone like one of my friends, Ricky Hatfield, he's like
Ricky.
Yeah, shout out. He's like super talented, and he did all that when he was younger. So now he's at a point, it only takes him 2 minutes to listen to a song on his phone, and he's pretty much memorized the whole song. Like you like cool. Do one pass over the song, and he's like, yeah, I got most of it. Let me check the bridge really quick. And then like that's all he needs, and he could do the song perfectly. So like talking about using younger people, they have that time. They're going to be ambitious and trying to reach those goals. And if we can get ourselves to that point in life, like before we get married and have those responsibilities, we're going to slow down naturally. Like it's just part of the process. We're going to naturally slow down. But if we can get to a certain point, that's going to help us later on in those talents and stuff like that. Now, that's not to say you don't stop learning. I think that's maybe one of the problems that we get to is like once you do get married, it's like you stop going to practices and you stop learning new things. And it's like, especially in production, there's new stuff coming out all the time. Like this is the wrong ministry if you're going to not want to learn new gear, new things, right? Or like even learn from other people. Like this is the wrong ministry. I think one of my good friends, Vito, it talks about that quite often. It's like that old school thing. It's like once you say like when you say you're old school, that means you stopped learning at some point.
Oh, that's so good. I've never heard that before. No, I just do it old school, man. It's like, oh, so
meaning you don't want to be better.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Because nothing new is coming out for 30 years. We haven't learned anything in 30 years.
Yeah.
So
that's so fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like understand that. And I've been in trainings where I've had to say that, and there's been people that are like, that's me. you know. And
Sure.
I've actually, most of the conversations I've had are like really positive conversations with people. Like when someone like knows I'm kind of talking about them, not that I'm like going in intentionally like adding them or that person, but they know like I'm talking about that mindset, and they'll just be like, you know, I kind of realized I was like, I am kind of that person that kind of stopped learning a little bit. Like, what recommendations do you have? It's like, that's like, once you realize that, it's like it opens up like, maybe what can we do to give this person the resources, like, so I just sent them some resources and was like, hey man, like, here's a couple good resources I used when I was like learning, or maybe you need to learn about this specifically, like here's some tools, you know, like go ahead and watch these videos or listen to this podcast, and then maybe hopefully that would like create a little fire in them to grow it. Because the thing is like, I'm not going to ask anyone to be like spending 5 hours a week or 5 hours a day on trying to like learn how to be better at mixing, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you have a wife and kids, like you need to spend time with them and stuff like that. That's like unrealistic expectations, right? But it's like, an hour a week is not too much for you to spend on,
well, especially if it's a passion or it's something you really want to be involved in. Like, you should be expected to spend some time learning this skill.
But like in the even like using kids, this is one of the things I've actually like got a trigger on this last week. But using kids in ministry and stuff like that, by kids I mean under 18, is that if you create a certain standard, right? And I think about it like in the worship team, but same goes for everything else. First of all, that young person needs to be spiritually there. And like if you're putting someone in ministry, like especially in a mixed position, for example, like I depend on anointing, and I expect, like, I have to be in the spirit, like when I'm mixing. Otherwise there's a big disconnect about what I'm doing versus what the team on stage is doing. But that goes for other ministries and stuff. So you can't put someone that's not spiritually there. It's probably one of my biggest gripes, honestly, is it's just so important. Like I feel like I've missed out, like I've made people miss out because I didn't have my heart correct, like right in the right place. But using young people in ministry, if we create a standard, or if we don't have a standard, all those young people think. So I'll use this example. This is the one I see all the time. We have like this keys 2 position, and then we don't have any people that really play organ well at my church. So and I shouldn't say just my church, but I mean this, like I've gone out, and almost every church I've gone to has something similar to this, and they stick people that don't know what they're doing on these positions, like keys 2. And like keys 2, if you don't know, you're just playing like a lot of time these guys are just playing pads, you know. And it's just like the 1-3-5 or the 1-5, and then that's it. Well, the reality of that position is like if they were doing it well, you'd be playing like all the lead synth parts and stuff of every song instead of leaving it in the track. So like, and then the other thing is the keys 1 position could do everything that the keys 2 position is doing. So it's like a pointless position unless you're trying to like train them. And what happens typically is that people get stuck in that position and they just do it every single week, and no one's telling them like what part to play. So they're just playing this pad every single Sunday for years. They're not getting better at actually playing piano or playing synth. And it's like, that's a useless position. The other thing is, what it tells to other people is that you don't have to be that good to get up on stage. And I feel like we should have a standard, so people are wanting to work. When I was younger, we had like 3 drummers at my church, really good decent drummers. And it was like, man, I was like, I'd be that kid like watching the drummer like next to the drum set, you know those.
yeah. The hey man, if you got to go pray, I'll hop on.
And I was like, I was like those kids at camp that are like sitting by the drum set just watching them and stuff like that.
Sure.
It's like I was that kid. But it was like there was a standard that my church team had set, and they were like, yeah, you're not going to be playing drums until you're better,
Yeah.
It's like whenever that point happens for you, cool, and I didn't end up playing drums until I was like 16, but I started when I was 8, and wasn't that good, and but then when I was 16, then I started being one of the main drummers, and so it was a process for me, but there was a standard, and because of that standard, I wanted to work harder to get there, and so I was willing to invest the time, and yeah, it took me a long time because I wasn't necessarily as talented in that. I don't think I was as talented as a musician, right? And so I felt like I had to work harder to get those things, I guess. Versus other people. And so, but I had to work hard to do that. So what are we saying by just putting people on stage or putting people in production roles that are not that good? We're just saying anybody can do whatever. We don't really care about quality at this point. That's what it says to me.
It's setting a poor precedent.
Yeah.
It's setting a poor precedent, especially if we really do believe that we should do everything with excellence.
Exactly. So I'm a big believer in using kids, but the kids that are talented and creating that training ground. I feel so like privileged to be at a church where we have a school. Not a lot of churches get to have schools, so we have rush services, and that is like, I'm just saying. And now it's a training ground because we're able to put younger students in those musician roles and those vocal roles. A lot of times we'll have some young adults help them because we're not trying to like just squash a service, right? Like that service still is almost just as important as any other service, but it's a little bit of a we want to say a better environment for making mistakes. So like it's not as high of a standard, right, when it comes to our normal services.
Low risk.
Yeah, it's still really important, and so like there's still a standard. Like we're just not going to put anybody up there. Sure. But that is a perfect playing ground, especially when we're trying to train worship leaders how to worship lead. It's like that's where they can figure out how to worship lead and how to interact with the congregation.
Oh, that's smart.
The audience and
that's really cool.
And so I feel like, man, if there's any service and I suggest other churches, if you don't have that, if you don't have a school, do like a youth service, like once a month on a Wednesday night or, whatever, let them lead, let them speak or whatever. Create those roles where it's not as important. Like, like especially when we're talking about like you have a congregation and they say half your congregation's been at the church for 15 years or whatever, they're going to be comfortable with someone that's not perfect etiquette.
It's low pressure. It's low pressure. The expectation isn't high because there aren't new people or there aren't unfamiliar faces.
Yeah, you do it where you're not going to have a lot of visitors or that kind of thing. So it's not as critical, right? But you're helping them gain confidence so that they can continue doing what they're doing. But I think there's a right place and right time for that. And even with sound, like I would never put a new person mixing on a Sunday morning service. Like that's the last thing I'm going to do. Sure. But it's going to be like they're going to end up, the first thing that they'll ever do before they actually mix any services, they'll like mix a sermon. So it's like one fader.
Yeah,
they're mixing
just
one
watch
fader.
The cues,
yeah, they're just pushing up and down, riding the volume, making sure that it's not too loud, it's not too soft, right? And then the next element for them, maybe it's a month down the road or 2 months down the road, then they'll mix a altar call, right? So our pastor is going to typically ask for the congregation to come forward and commit their lives or ask if people are needing to get prayed over, that kind of thing, right? So we call it altar call. When they go up, like sometimes I actually use that as a training ground because it's less pressure. It's not as much. We turn down the volume just a little bit because a lot of people are speaking to each other in the altar area. Yeah. And so it's a little bit less pressure. And then it's like once you can, like they've done the preaching, they've done the altar call, they're getting better. They really started getting an ear for it. Now it's like, now we can get them into mixing a service, So it's one of those things. I think it's a process. Cool. It's a process. So
yeah, I appreciate the stepping stones too, because you're taking someone on a journey essentially, and not throwing them in the deep end and saying, all right, now you have to do exactly how I had to do it. And that's what I think is unfair a lot of times is we want people to have the same exact hard experience that we had. So like you have to learn and fail just like I did. And there's a good part of failing. Failing helps grow and develop, but I don't think everybody needs to fall flat on their face.
Like I learned, like I got thrown in the fire pit type of thing. Like, do you feel like you did that? Like you went through the fire pit?
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yes. That's also because like when I started doing video, it was still relatively new in our movement.
Yeah.
Like Chase Condon was like the only guy really like pushing out videos all the time, like recap style. And I got asked to go do an event, and I'd never done an event in my life, much less do photo and video for the event. And so I'm there doing it, and I'm like, bro, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. And it felt like I just got thrown to the wolves. But that's like what grew and developed me.
Yeah. No, that's like, and I feel like, man, I don't want to be this person, but like, I feel like everybody now, and maybe this is because we're like older.
They all got it so easy now.
But it's like everyone's got it so easy. Like you didn't have to deal with what I had to deal with. You know, you guys have all the new gear and everything.
Yeah,
you know? What's fun, and I'll take you back to like my introduction to sound. Like this is where I kind of started, right?
Okay, hold on. We'll pause for 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
My camera is about to die.
Oh, seriously?
And
okay, cool.
Yeah, I have been like sitting here like trying to figure out how to how to
I hope this
segue
one's not gonna die.
to pause this. I was worried about that. Okay, so let's we're gonna stop this, and then we're gonna start a new one.
Okay, cool.
And I'm gonna resend an invite. Hopefully, we don't have any technical issues.